White airline staff harass black woman. Minutes later, she destroys their biggest deal. Imagine stepping into an opulent airport lounge, expecting luxury and respect, only to be met with stares, whispers, and humiliation. A poised, successful black woman suddenly finds herself the target of unwarranted scrutiny from the very staff meant to serve her. What they didn't realize was that in just 6 minutes, she would turn their world upside down. How did it all unfold? Stay tuned, this is a story you won't forget. Before we dive in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. If you appreciate powerful stories of resilience and justice, don't forget to like this video, share it, and subscribe for more incredible tales. Your support helps us bring these impactful narratives to even more people. Now, let's get into it. The airport lounge hummed with a quiet intensity, murmured conversations, the clinking of fine glassware, and the distant buzz of flight announcements. Jasmine Carter stepped through the sleek glass doors, her heels tapping lightly against the polished marble floor. Her tailored navy suit fit her perfectly, exuding confidence and professionalism. Adjusting the strap of her leather briefcase, she surveyed the room with calm, discerning eyes. The air was crisp, and the lighting was deliberately extravagant, casting a soft glow over the lounge's silver-accented decor. Yet, beneath this polished luxury, Jasmine could feel the weight of unwelcome gazes. She was used to this. A young man in a pressed uniform approached her, a clipboard in hand. He offered a polite smile, though a flicker of hesitation betrayed his expression. "Good afternoon, ma'am," he greeted her, his tone carefully measured. "May I see your boarding pass and membership card?" Jasmine retrieved the documents with practiced ease, maintaining a composed smile. "Of course," she said smoothly, handing them over. The young man's smile wavered as he glanced at the card, his brow creasing slightly. "Ah, one moment, please." He disappeared behind the counter, leaving Jasmine standing alone, now the subject of quiet murmurs. She didn't need to hear the words to know what was being said. Moments later, a woman in a sharp red blazer emerged from behind the counter. Her name tag read Heather, with meticulously styled hair and a gaze that radiated authority. No matter how trivial, she exuded an air of self-importance. "Miss Carter, is it?" Heather asked, her voice laced with condescension. She held Jasmine's membership card as though it were counterfeit. "Are you aware that this is a priority lounge?" Jasmine's smile didn't falter, though her grip on her briefcase tightened slightly. "Yes, I'm well aware. I've been a priority member for over 5 years." Heather's lips pressed into a thin line. She glanced at the card again, then back at Jasmine, her expression skeptical. "I'm going to need further verification," she said smoothly. "We've had some issues with unauthorized use of these cards recently." The implication was clear. "Unauthorized use?" Jasmine echoed, her voice calm yet firm. She took a deliberate step closer, her presence commanding. "If you're suggesting this card doesn't belong to me, I can assure you it does." Heather didn't so much as blink. Instead, she smirked, a subtle but deliberate gesture. "I just need to run it through our system," she said, feigning politeness. "It's standard procedure. I'm sure you understand." Jasmine's jaw tightened, but she nodded. "Take your time." Heather disappeared again, leaving Jasmine standing under the weight of judgmental glances. She could feel the unspoken questions swirling around her. What's she doing here? How could she afford this? Nearby, a couple whispered to one another, their eyes darting toward Jasmine before quickly looking away. Jasmine straightened her posture, refusing to let their scrutiny shake her composure. Minutes passed. Finally, Heather returned, her expression smug. "Well, Miss Carter," she said, stretching out the words as if savoring them, "it appears everything checks out. However, I must remind you that priority members are expected to uphold a certain standard of decorum while in the lounge." Jasmine's eyes narrowed slightly. "And what standard would that be?" Heather tilted her head, her smile widening ever so slightly. "Let's just say we expect a level of refinement that reflects the exclusivity of this space." The message was clear. the insult thinly veiled. Jasmine didn't rise to the bait. Instead, she took a slow, deliberate breath and returned Heather's smile cool, unreadable. "Thank you for the clarification," she said smoothly. Heather blinked, as though surprised by Jasmine's measured response. She opened her mouth to say something else, but Jasmine had already turned away, making her way to a seat near the corner of the lounge. She set down her briefcase and pulled out her phone, her fingers hovering over the screen as she weighed her next move. This wasn't the first time she had experienced this type of treatment, but this time it was especially blatant. A quiet resolve settled over her. She tapped a contact and lifted the phone to her ear. "This is Jasmine Carter," she said, her voice calm but edged with steel. "We need to discuss our contract with Skyline Air. There's been an incident." Heather's laughter echoed faintly from behind the counter, oblivious to the storm brewing just 6 minutes away. The lounge's polished hum continued around Jasmine as she ended the call, her hand lingering on her phone for just a moment longer than necessary. A familiar pang of indignation rippled through her, but she kept it tightly contained, maintaining her cool exterior. She leaned back in her seat, waiting. The tables were about to turn. The supple leather beneath her offered little comfort as she silently observed the scene around her. Heather and the other staff had resumed their tasks, their movements tinged with quiet arrogance. Heather's laughter rang out again, sharp, deliberate, almost as if daring Jasmine to react. The rest of the staff, emboldened by Heather's presence, exchanged quick, conspiratorial glances that spoke volumes. Jasmine caught the tail end of a comment from one of them, a younger man with a clipped accent who muttered, "She probably saved for months just to step in here." The others chuckled, their laughter just loud enough for her to hear. Do they really think this is acceptable? Jasmine wondered, her fingers grazing the sleek surface of her briefcase. Inside it lay the weight of her company's success. Proposals, contracts, partnerships that had taken years of dedication and resilience to build. She thought of the countless hours spent proving herself in boardrooms filled with dismissive stares, of the silent battles fought and won. This moment was just another test, one she would not fail. A soft vibration against the table interrupted her thoughts. Her phone buzzed, the name on the screen reading, Anderson Quinn, her company's chief operating officer. Jasmine swiped to answer, her voice steady. "Jasmine." Anderson's deep, authoritative voice came through. "I got your message. What's going on?" She glanced toward the counter, where Heather now leaned casually against it, radiating smug satisfaction. "There's been an issue with Skyline Air," Jasmine said, her voice calm but laced with quiet intensity. "Their staff seems to think it's acceptable to demean customers based on appearances." A pause followed on the other end of the line. "Appearances?" Anderson asked, his tone sharp with understanding. "Yes," Jasmine confirmed, her gaze locked on Heather. "I was accused of misusing my membership card, then subjected to veiled insults about my presence in this lounge, all thinly disguised as protocol." Anderson let out a low, disapproving sigh. "Unacceptable," he said firmly. "Do you want me to initiate the process?" "Not yet." Jasmine leaned forward slightly, resting her elbows on the table. Her voice dropped, quiet but deliberate. "I want them to feel the full weight of what they've done, Anderson. Not just a slap on the wrist." Anderson chuckled darkly, his approval evident. "Understood. I'll be ready when you are." Jasmine ended the call, setting her phone face down on the table. She allowed herself a moment to breathe, to let the fire in her chest settle into a steady, controlled burn. The path forward was clear now, and she was prepared to take it. A sudden commotion snapped her focus back to the lounge. Heather's phone buzzed loudly on the counter. Glancing at the screen, Heather's smug expression faltered. She answered the call, her voice bright and practiced. "This is Heather, Skyline Air Priority Services," she chirped. Her face changed almost instantly as the voice on the other end spoke. Eyes widened, mouth tightened. Her entire demeanor shifted. Turning her back to the lounge, she lowered her voice, but not enough to conceal the tension. "Yes, sir. I understand," she stammered. But I didn't realize. Her voice trailed off as she cast a nervous glance toward Jasmine, who remained seated, watching the scene unfold with detached calm. The other staff members began to take notice. Heather no longer carried herself with the same air of authority. Instead, she looked cornered, her shoulders hunched, as if bracing for impact. A junior staff member approached, whispering something Jasmine couldn't make out. Heather shook her head sharply, her movements abrupt and panicked. The phone call ended abruptly. Heather turned back to the counter, her face drained of color. She whispered something to the junior employee, who immediately darted toward the back office. The rest of the staff exchanged uneasy glances, a sense of tension thickening the air. Jasmine didn't move. She didn't need to. She was content to let them squirm in the growing silence, each passing second stretching like the long shadows of an approaching storm. Finally, Heather hesitated before making her way toward Jasmine's table. Her once confident stride was now hesitant. Her voice, though attempting professionalism, wavered at the edges. "Miss Carter," she began, her tone markedly different. I'd like to apologize for the misunderstanding earlier." Jasmine tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. "Misunderstanding?" she repeated, her voice smooth as glass. "Is that what you're calling it?" Heather flinched, her hands clasped nervously in front of her. "I assure you, we meant no disrespect." "We?" Jasmine raised a hand, cutting her off. "You meant no disrespect?" she echoed, her voice calm but firm. "Yet you openly mocked me. You insinuated I didn't belong here. Tell me, Heather, would you have done the same to anyone else who walked in with my credentials?" Heather's mouth opened, but no words came out. Jasmine let the silence stretch, each passing second more suffocating than the last. "You understand, don't you?" Jasmine said finally, her tone cool and measured. "If I don't accept your apology, actions have consequences. And you'll see that soon enough." Heather's face turned ashen. Without another word, she retreated. The lounge fell into silence once more, but the tension lingered. Jasmine picked up her phone and dialed. "Pull the trigger," she said simply. Anderson's response was swift and resolute. "Consider it done." The storm was about to break. The lounge seemed to hold its breath. The once lively chatter had faded to scattered whispers and the occasional clink of glass. Jasmine remained seated, her posture regal, her expression unyielding, even as the atmosphere around her shifted. She could feel the weight of their discomfort pressing against her, a tangible force. Heather lingered near the counter, her phone clutched tightly in her trembling hands. Heather's earlier arrogance had vanished, replaced by a nervous energy teetering on the edge of panic. Every few moments, she glanced toward Jasmine, as if searching for some unspoken signal to reverse the unraveling chain of events. But Jasmine offered none. Instead, she let her presence loom, silent, unyielding. The glass doors of the lounge hissed open, and a tall, impeccably dressed man strode inside. His movements were brisk and purposeful, his tailored suit and silver tie marking him as someone of significance. The tension in the room intensified as heads instinctively turned to follow him. It was Edward Langston, Skyline Air's regional director, a man known for his no-nonsense demeanor and unwavering approach to discipline. Heather's eyes widened the moment she spotted him. Her lips moved silently, as if forming a desperate prayer, but no sound escaped. Edward scanned the room briefly before his gaze landed on Jasmine. His expression softened just slightly, but the steel in his posture remained. He approached her table with measured steps. "Miss Carter," he greeted, his voice smooth yet tinged with unease. "I believe we need to talk." Jasmine offered a polite but distant smile. "Indeed, Mr. Langston. Please have a seat." She gestured toward the chair across from her. He obeyed without hesitation, his movements cautious, as though navigating a minefield. Folding his hands on the table, he sat with a posture that was almost deferential. "First, allow me to extend my deepest apologies for the treatment you received here today," he said. "It is completely unacceptable, and I assure you, It does not reflect Skyline Air's values. Jasmine arched a brow, her expression unreadable. And yet it happened, she replied evenly. Not just once, but repeatedly. This wasn't an isolated incident, Mr. Langston. It was a culture, one your staff felt entirely comfortable upholding. Edward's jaw tightened, though his demeanor remained professional. You're absolutely right, Miss Carter, he admitted, and I take full responsibility for that culture. Immediate steps will be taken to correct it. Jasmine leaned forward slightly, her gaze locking onto his. Steps? She echoed. Mr. Langston, I'm not here for vague assurances or half measures. Do you have any idea what was at stake in this situation? He hesitated, his eyes flickering toward the staff, who stood frozen in place. Their earlier bravado had dissolved into fear. Heather, still behind the counter, was stiff and pale, her hands trembling as she pretended to busy herself with meaningless tasks. I do, Edward finally said, his voice quieter but no less firm. Your account is one of our most significant and valued partnerships. Losing it would. Would what? Jasmine interrupted, her tone sharp but controlled. Be inconvenient? Costly? Embarrassing? She sat back, folding her arms. What about the humiliation I endured? The assumptions? The blatant disrespect? Do you know how many times I've had to prove myself simply because I walk into rooms like this with the wrong skin color? Edward flinched, but he didn't look away. Miss Carter, I can't undo what's been done, he said. But I can assure you that those responsible will be held accountable. Skyline Air will not tolerate this behavior moving forward. Jasmine studied him in silence, the weight of the moment thick between them. Then, after a pause, she gave a single nod, a small but significant gesture. Good, she said coolly, because I've already canceled my contract. Edward's composure faltered for the briefest moment, his eyes widening before he quickly masked his shock. Miss Carter, he began, leaning forward slightly. Please reconsider. There's nothing to reconsider, Jasmine interrupted, her voice leaving no room for negotiation. I've given Skyline Air every opportunity to prove its worth, and time again it has failed. My decision is final. The weight of her words settled over Edward like a physical blow. He leaned back slightly, his shoulders sagging just a bit. I understand, he said quietly, but please know that we will do everything in our power to regain your trust. Jasmine didn't respond immediately. Instead, she picked up her phone, tapping the screen with deliberate precision. Without looking at him, she spoke. I hope you do, Mr. Langston. If not for my sake, then for the sake of your other customers. Edward rose to leave, but before departing, he turned toward the staff. His gaze swept over them, cold and unyielding, before settling on Heather. She froze under his scrutiny, her face ghostly pale. Heather, he said, his voice like ice. A word. Now. Heather swallowed hard and followed him out of the lounge, her steps faltering. The rest of the staff exchanged uneasy glances, their earlier camaraderie fractured under the weight of their collective guilt. Jasmine watched them for a brief moment, her expression unreadable. Then, rising from her seat, she picked up her briefcase and walked toward the exit. Her steps were slow, deliberate, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. The glass doors hissed open as she stepped through, and for a fleeting moment, the lounge was silent once more. But the storm she had left behind was far from over. The silence thickened in her absence. The soft clinking of glasses, the murmur of distant conversations. All of it felt muted, like the calm before an inevitable reckoning. Behind the counter, staff members shuffled nervously, stealing glances toward the door where Heather and Edward had disappeared just moments before. The air was heavy with anticipation, and no one dared to speak. Heather sat rigidly in the cramped back office, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Edward Langston loomed over her, his presence dominating the small space. The harsh fluorescent lighting cast sharp shadows across his face, accentuating the hard set of his jaw and the unmistakable glint of fury in his eyes. Do you have any idea what you've done? Edward's voice was low, but it carried the weight of a brewing storm. He leaned on the edge of the desk, his knuckles whitening as they pressed against the wood. Heather swallowed hard, the confidence she had displayed earlier now completely shattered. "Sir, I didn't." "You didn't what?" Edward snapped, cutting her off. "Didn't think? Didn't care? Or didn't realize that the woman you just humiliated controls one of the most critical partnerships this airline has ever had?" Heather's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She searched desperately for words, but none came. The gravity of her actions was finally sinking in. "This isn't just about losing a contract," Edward continued, his tone turning icier. "This is about the reputation of this airline. Do you have any idea how fast news like this can spread? Do you understand the damage you've caused?" Heather's hands trembled in her lap. "I didn't mean to offend her," she said weakly. It was a misunderstanding." Edward straightened, his eyes narrowing. "A misunderstanding?" he repeated, his voice laced with disbelief. "You think mocking a paying customer, questioning her legitimacy, and openly laughing at her was a misunderstanding?" His expression hardened.
No, Heather.
This was prejudice, plain and simple. Heather flinched at the word, her carefully constructed defenses crumbling under the weight of his accusations. "I didn't mean for it to come across that way," she murmured, tears pooling in her eyes. Edward's gaze remained unyielding. "Intent doesn't matter. Impact does. And the impact of your actions just cost this airline millions." While Heather faced Edward's wrath behind closed doors, the remaining staff were left stewing in the lounge. The junior employees exchanged nervous whispers, their earlier camaraderie dissolving into a storm of blame and fear. "Do you think she'll lose her job?" one of them muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "She has to," another replied. "Did you see the look on Langston's face? He was furious." "What about us?" a young woman asked, her voice trembling. "We didn't stop her. Does that make us just as guilty?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. They all knew the truth, even if no one dared to say it aloud. Unbeknownst to the staff, Jasmine had not left the airport entirely. Instead, she had relocated to a quieter area, where she observed the unfolding chaos from a distance. Sitting by a large window overlooking the runway, her reflection stared back at her against the backdrop of taxiing planes. Her phone buzzed softly. She glanced at the screen. A message from Anderson. "The termination process is underway. I've secured a meeting with our new partner tomorrow." A small smile played on Jasmine's lips. Their new partner was an airline known for its progressive policies and customer-first approach. One she was confident would uphold the standards that Skyline had so blatantly failed to meet. But her satisfaction was tinged with bitterness. The sting of Heather's words and the mocking laughter of the staff still lingered. It had never just been about the contract or the money. It was about the principle, the countless times she and others like her had been dismissed, belittled, or underestimated. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. This was a victory, hard-fought and costly, but a victory nonetheless, and she wouldn't let it go to waste. Within hours, the repercussions began to ripple outward. Despite Jasmine's efforts to keep the matter private, news of the incident had already reached social media. A passenger in the lounge had recorded a snippet of the staff's mocking remarks and uploaded it with the caption, "Priority Lounge or Priority Prejudice. Watch how Skyline treats its customers." The video spread like wildfire, sparking outrage from viewers across the globe. Skyline's public relations team scrambled to contain the damage, issuing a carefully worded apology, one that did little to quell the storm. By the time Edward re-entered the lounge, his face was unreadable, set in stone. Without hesitation, he gestured for the remaining staff to gather near the counter. His voice, sharp and commanding, cut through the hushed tension. "I want every one of you to listen very carefully," he began, his tone leaving no room for argument. "What happened here today was unacceptable. There is no place for this kind of behavior in our company, and I will not tolerate it." The staff exchanged uneasy glances, their previous confidence completely eroded. Heather trailed behind Edward, her face pale, shoulders slumped. Effective immediately, Edward continued, Heather is no longer employed by Skyline Air. She has been terminated for gross misconduct. A small, choked sound escaped Heather's lips, but Edward didn't so much as glance at her. His attention remained on the group. As for the rest of you, he said, his voice dropping dangerously low, consider this your only warning. If I hear even a whisper of behavior like this again, you'll be joining her. The staff nodded mutely, their faces etched with fear and shame. From her vantage point, Jasmine watched the scene unfold, her expression calm, yet filled with quiet satisfaction. Gathering her things, she rose from her seat and made her way toward the exit. Her steps were slow and deliberate as she passed the lounge. Through the glass doors, she caught Edward's eye. He hesitated for a brief moment before giving her a small, respectful nod. Jasmine didn't stop. She didn't need to. Her point had been made, her justice delivered. As she stepped into the cool evening air outside the airport, a sense of calm washed over her. The storm had passed, and she had weathered it with her dignity intact. But for Skyline Air, the fallout was only just beginning. The car ride from the airport was silent, save for the soft hum of the engine. Jasmine sat in the back seat of the sleek black sedan, her head resting lightly against the window as the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and white. Her driver, a stoic older man named Samuel, had worked for her for years. He knew when to offer words of comfort and when to remain silent. Tonight, silence was what she needed. She exhaled slowly, her breath fogging up the cool glass. The evening had taken its toll, a stark reminder of battles fought long ago and the scars they had left behind. The words, the stares, the laughter, they clung to her like smoke, acrid and suffocating. But there was no room for self-pity. Jasmine Carter had built her life on resilience, turning moments like these into the foundation of her success. Yet tonight, the weight of it all felt heavier than usual. Her phone buzzed in her lap, pulling her from her thoughts. She hesitated before glancing at the screen. Anderson Quinn again. "Good evening, Anderson," she answered, her tone neutral. "Jasmine," he began, his voice steady but tinged with concern. "I just got word. The video's gone viral. It's everywhere. News outlets, social media, even a few international networks. People are furious with Skyline." Jasmine closed her eyes briefly. She had expected fallout, but not at this scale, not so quickly. "Let them handle it," she said softly. "It's their mess to clean up." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "You're sure you don't want to make a statement? People are calling you a hero, Jasmine. They're waiting to hear from you." She opened her eyes, gazing out at the illuminated skyline beyond the window. "I didn't do this to be a hero, Anderson. I did it because it was right. That's enough." Anderson sighed, but there was no disagreement in his voice. "Understood. The new partner is ready for tomorrow. They're eager to finalize things." Jasmine allowed herself a faint smile. "Good. Let's make sure we're not putting ourselves in another situation like this one." "We won't," he assured her. "Rest well, Jasmine. You've earned it." She ended the call and set her phone aside, her gaze drifting back to the lights as the car approached her townhouse. Unbidden and vivid, her thoughts slipped into the past. She remembered her first encounter with prejudice. She had been 10 years old, standing in line at a toy store with her mother. A man behind them had grumbled something about their kind always holding up the line. Her mother had stiffened but said nothing, only tightening her fingers around Jasmine's shoulder as they stepped forward. Later, in the car, Jasmine had asked why the man was angry. Her mother had looked at her with weary eyes and simply said, "Sometimes, people see the color of your skin before they see you, but that doesn't mean you let them define who you are." That lesson had shaped Jasmine's life, both a burden and a source of strength. Tonight, her mother's words echoed in her mind, grounding her once more. The next morning, by morning, the fallout from the incident had intensified. Jasmine sat in her sunlit kitchen, sipping her coffee as she scrolled through an endless stream of articles, tweets, and videos. Airline scandal, Priority Lounge prejudice sparks outrage. Black businesswoman stands up to discrimination. A viral moment of justice. Skyline Air faces backlash after racist incident in lounge. Her name was trending across platforms, accompanied by hashtags like #JusticeForJasmine and #SkylineScandal. The footage from the lounge had been dissected and analyzed, with viewers condemning not just Heather, but the airline's entire corporate culture. A knock at the door interrupted her scrolling. Setting her phone down, she crossed the room and opened the door to find Samuel holding a crisp envelope. "This was just delivered, ma'am," he said, handing it to her. Jasmine took the envelope, her brow furrowing as she noticed the embossed Skyline Air logo in the corner. "Thank you, Samuel," she murmured before closing the door. Walking back to the kitchen, she carefully opened the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of heavy paper. A letter from Skyline's CEO. "Dear Ms. Carter, on behalf of Skyline Air, I want to extend my sincerest apologies for the unacceptable treatment you endured in our lounge. I am deeply ashamed that our staff acted in a manner so antithetical to our values of respect, inclusion, and excellence. The individuals responsible have been terminated, and we are implementing mandatory training across all levels of our organization to ensure this never happens again. Furthermore, we would like to offer you lifetime priority membership as a gesture of our regret. Please know that your experience has become a catalyst for meaningful change within our company. If there is anything further we can do to make amends, do not hesitate to reach out. With deepest apologies, Elliot Greer, CEO Skyline Air." Jasmine stared at the letter, her emotions a complex tangle of vindication, frustration, and exhaustion. A lifetime membership. Was that supposed to erase the sting of Heather's words? The laughter that had echoed through the lounge? She folded the letter neatly and placed it on the counter. Actions spoke louder than words, and she had already set her own course in motion. Later that afternoon, Jasmine sat in a sleek conference room, surrounded by representatives from her new airline partner. The atmosphere was professional yet optimistic, a stark contrast to the tension of the day before. "We're thrilled to have you on board, Ms. Carter," the CEO said, extending a hand. "Your values align perfectly with ours, and we're committed to ensuring that every passenger is treated with the dignity and respect they deserve." Jasmine shook his hand firmly, a quiet confidence in her eyes. "That's exactly what I needed to hear." Jasmine shook his hand, her smile genuine. "Thank you. I'm looking forward to a partnership built on integrity and mutual respect." As the meeting concluded, a sense of closure settled over her. The wounds from the previous day had not fully healed, but they had given way to something stronger, a renewed determination to fight for justice. Not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been underestimated, dismissed, or belittled. Justice was not a single moment. It was a process, and Jasmine Carter was ready to see it through. The evening sun cast a golden glow over the city as Jasmine walked through her townhouse, her heels clicking softly against the hardwood floors. Though filled with modern elegance, the house felt unusually quiet. She paused by the large window overlooking the skyline, her reflection blending with the fading light. In her hand, she held the letter from Skyline Air's CEO. His words lingered in her mind. The apology had been formal, even contrite, but it felt hollow. A lifetime membership and promises of corporate reform could not erase the deeper wounds inflicted that night, wounds that weren't just hers, but echoed the experiences of countless others. She placed the letter on the sleek black coffee table and sat down, her thoughts racing. Was it enough to let this go? To move forward with her new partner and leave Skyline to deal with the fallout? The answer came almost immediately.
No.
Jasmine Carter didn't walk away from battles. She finished them. Retrieving her laptop from the side table, she opened it, the glow of the screen illuminating her face. With purpose, she began typing, her fingers moving deftly across the keyboard. If Skyline Air was truly committed to change, it would take more than a single letter and a few firings. She delved into the company's history, scrolling through employee reviews, customer complaints, and past controversies. What she found wasn't surprising, but it was infuriating. A pattern of discrimination complaints, buried beneath polished PR campaigns and carefully worded settlements. A former employee's testimonial caught her attention. Skyline talks a big game about diversity, but behind the scenes, it's a different story. I witnessed firsthand how certain customers and employees were treated differently based on their background. It's a toxic culture they refuse to address. Jasmine's jaw tightened as she read further. The stories were eerily similar to her own experience. Customers humiliated, employees marginalized, all under the guise of policies and procedures. This wasn't just an isolated incident. It was a systemic issue. The next morning, Jasmine placed a call to Anderson. His voice came through the line, crisp and alert as always. "Good morning, Jasmine. How's everything on your end?" "Busy," she replied, her tone calm but resolute. "I need your help with something." "Of course. What's on your mind?" "I've been digging into Skyline Air's history," she said, leaning back in her chair. "What happened to me wasn't an isolated case. It's part of a pattern, a culture that's been allowed to thrive unchecked." Anderson let out a low whistle. "I figured as much. What do you want to do about it?" Jasmine's gaze drifted to the skyline outside her window, her eyes narrowing slightly. "We're going to expose it publicly. This isn't just about my experience. It's about every person they've wronged, every voice they've silenced. It's time Skyline answers for their actions." Anderson was silent for a moment, then spoke. "You're not just talking about a press release, are you?" "No," Jasmine said firmly. "I want a full investigation. We'll work with legal teams, journalists, and advocates. If Skyline thinks they can sweep this under the rug, they're about to learn otherwise." The investigation begins. Over the next few weeks, Jasmine assembled a team of professionals who shared her vision. Civil rights lawyers, investigative journalists eager to uncover the truth, and grassroots advocates who had long fought against systemic injustice. Meetings stretched late into the night, the team poring over documents, interviewing former employees, and compiling evidence. Jasmine's townhouse became an impromptu headquarters, its normally pristine surfaces covered in folders, laptops, and half-empty coffee cups. Through it all, Jasmine remained a steady force, her determination inspiring those around her. One evening, a young journalist named Claire approached her, holding a stack of papers. "Ms. Carter, we found something you should see." Jasmine took the papers, scanning them quickly, her eyes narrowing as the pieces fell into place. Claire continued, urgency in her voice. "It's worse than we thought. There's evidence that Skyline suppressed multiple discrimination claims, forcing employees and customers into settlements with non-disclosure agreements." Jasmine set the papers down, her expression unreadable. "How many?" "Dozens," Claire replied. "Maybe more." Jasmine exhaled slowly, the weight of the discovery settling over her. Then, she straightened, her resolve unwavering. "Then we've got what we need. Let's make it count." The exposure. The exposé broke on a quiet Wednesday morning. Major news outlets published the findings simultaneously, their headlines bold and unflinching. Skyline Air's hidden scandals. A culture of discrimination exposed. Whistleblowers speak out. Decades of racism and inequality at Skyline Air. Jasmine Carter's fight for justice spurs national conversation. The articles were detailed and damning, filled with testimonials from former employees and customers. Skyline Air had spent years covering its tracks. But now the world was watching. Those who had long been silenced finally had a voice. And at the heart of it all was Jasmine's own story, a catalyst for change. Her name and image dominated television screens and online platforms. Skyline's CEO, Elliot Greer, was forced to face the media in an emergency press conference. His usual polished demeanor faltered under the weight of pointed questions, his apologies sounding increasingly hollow. "We are deeply sorry for the harm caused," he stammered. "We are committed to implementing meaningful reforms." A reporter interrupted, holding up a printed copy of the exposé. "Mr. Greer, why didn't Skyline address these issues when they were first reported? Why did it take a public scandal to force your hand?" Greer's response was drowned out by the rapid clicks of cameras and murmurs spreading through the press corps. Watching the live coverage from her office, Jasmine felt a quiet sense of satisfaction settle over her. The fight was far from over, but this was a turning point. Not just for her, but for everyone who had ever been dismissed, overlooked, or dehumanized. Her phone buzzed. A text from Anderson. "You did it, Jasmine. This is bigger than anyone imagined." She smiled faintly, her fingers hovering over the screen before she typed her reply. "We did it. And this is just the beginning." Jasmine Carter didn't just weather storms. She turned them into movements. And this time, the world was watching. The aftermath. The days following the exposé were a whirlwind of media scrutiny, legal action, and public outrage. Skyline Air's headquarters became the epicenter of protests. Demonstrators held signs reading "Accountability Now" and "Justice for All." News vans lined the streets, their cameras trained on the entrance as executives hurried in and out, dodging a barrage of flashbulbs and shouted questions. Jasmine observed it all from a distance, her townhouse serving as a refuge from the chaos she had set in motion. The fight was no longer hers alone. It had grown into a movement. Yet, even in victory, she couldn't shake the weight of the battle. Standing in her living room, she gazed out at the city below. The quiet felt more stifling than peaceful. Her reflection in the window stared back at her, a reminder of the toll this fight had taken. She thought of the people she had met throughout the investigation. Employees who had risked everything to tell the truth, customers who had finally found the courage to share their experiences. Each of them carried their own scars, their own burdens. Jasmine had become their voice, but that responsibility was heavy. The sharp chime of the doorbell broke the silence. She turned, her heels clicking softly against the floor as she walked toward the door. She wasn't expecting anyone, and Samuel had already left for the evening. Opening the door, she found a familiar face standing on the threshold. Claire, the young journalist who had uncovered some of the most damning evidence. Her auburn hair was slightly tousled, and she clutched a manila folder tightly in her hands. "Claire," Jasmine said, surprised. "What brings you here?" "Sorry for showing up unannounced," Claire began, urgency in her voice. "But there's something you need to see." Jasmine stepped aside, gesturing for her to come in. Claire moved quickly, her nervous energy palpable as she set the folder on the coffee table. "I thought we had found everything," Claire continued, her words tumbling out in a rush. "But I was wrong. There's more." Jasmine carefully opened the folder, scanning its contents. Internal memos, emails between executives, financial records. One email in particular caught her attention. "We need to handle this quietly. Any public acknowledgement could cause irreversible damage to the brand. Offer settlements where necessary, but ensure NDAs are signed." The date was recent, just weeks before the exposé had been published. Jasmine's eyes narrowed as she flipped through the pages, uncovering a pattern of deliberate cover-ups. "This changes everything," she murmured, her voice like steel. "Skyline didn't just ignore the problem," she continued, setting the papers down. "They actively worked to silence it." Claire nodded, her expression grim. "It gets worse," she said. "Some of the settlements involved intimidation. Employees were threatened with termination if they didn't comply." Jasmine leaned back, the weight of the revelation pressing down on her. "We can't let this stand," she said firmly. "The public needs to know the full extent of what's happened." Escalation. The following morning, Jasmine sat in her office, the documents spread out before her. She was on the phone with Anderson, her voice steady, unwavering. "This isn't just about exposing Skyline anymore," she said. "It's about making sure the people they hurt get justice. Real justice." Anderson sighed on the other end of the line. "You realize what you're taking on, right? This could escalate into a legal war. Skyline won't go down without a fight." "I'm not afraid of a fight," Jasmine replied. "I never have been. But this isn't about me. It's about every person who's been silenced, intimidated, or dismissed. If we don't see this through, who will?" Anderson was quiet for a moment before he finally spoke. "I'm with you, Jasmine. Whatever you need." As the days stretched into weeks, the battle only intensified. Jasmine spent long nights strategizing with lawyers, meeting with advocates, and preparing for the next wave of revelations. Each day brought new obstacles but also new victories. Yet the strain was undeniable. One evening, sitting alone in her living room, the exhaustion caught up with her. She rested her head in her hands, the sheer weight of it all pressing down on her like a physical force. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. A message from her mother's old friend, a woman who had been like an aunt to her growing up. "Proud of you, Jasmine. Your mother would be too. Stay strong." A lump rose in her throat. Jasmine Carter had started this fight for herself. Now she was fighting for so many more, and she wasn't backing down. Her mother's words from years ago echoed in her mind. Never let them define who you are. She sat up straighter, her resolve hardening. The fight wasn't over, but she would see it through. The next phase of the battle unfolded in courtrooms and boardrooms, with Jasmine leading the charge. The new evidence Claire had uncovered became a pivotal moment, forcing Skyline to face not only public outrage but also legal repercussions. Employees who had been silenced for years came forward in droves, their voices finally heard. Customers shared their experiences, each story adding to the growing wave of accountability. Through it all, Jasmine remained steadfast, a symbol of resilience and justice. She was no longer just fighting for herself. She was fighting for everyone who had ever been made to feel like they didn't belong. Months later, as the dust began to settle, Jasmine stood before a crowd at a press conference. The settlement with Skyline had been finalized, including reparations for those who had been wronged and sweeping reforms within the company. Jasmine spoke with quiet strength, her words carrying the weight of everything she had endured. "This isn't just about one company or one incident," she said. "It's about the choices we make every day to stand up for what's right, to demand better. Not just for ourselves, but for everyone." The crowd erupted into applause, but Jasmine's expression remained contemplative. This was a victory, but it was only the beginning of the change she wanted to see in the world. As she stepped away from the podium, she felt a sense of peace for the first time in months. The fight had been long and exhausting, but it had been worth it. Jasmine Carter had turned a moment of injustice into a movement for change. And she wasn't done yet. A new battle. The weeks after the Skyline settlement passed in an unusual stillness. The protests had died down, and the media's attention had shifted to other scandals. But the ripples of Jasmine's actions continued to spread. The airline remained under scrutiny, its restructuring efforts closely monitored by both the public and its shareholders. Skyline's promises of change were plastered across press releases, but Jasmine knew better than to take them at face value. Change, she understood, wasn't a singular event. It was a process, one that required constant vigilance. For Jasmine, life had resumed its steady rhythm, or at least as steady as it could be after the storm she had weathered. She immersed herself in work at her logistics firm, her days filled with meetings, strategic planning, and the occasional glance at Skyline's latest developments. Yet, despite her efforts to move forward, a nagging thought remained. The battle she had fought had been necessary and impactful, but it was only a symptom of a much larger issue. The injustice she had faced wasn't unique to Skyline. It was embedded in industries and systems far beyond one corporation. One crisp autumn morning, Jasmine found herself in a towering glass-walled office, overlooking the city. Across from her sat a group of executives from various industries, corporate leaders, heads of nonprofits, and prominent advocates for social justice. They had requested this meeting, and now she was here, curious to hear what they had to say. "Ms. Carter," an older man with salt and pepper hair began, his tone respectful. "Your fight against Skyline did more than hold a company accountable. It inspired a movement. You've given people the courage to speak up and demand better." Jasmine listened in silence, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "But inspiration isn't enough," the man continued. "We need action, real systemic change. And we believe you're the right person to lead that charge." He slid a folder across the table. Jasmine opened it, her eyes scanning the documents inside. Detailed plans outlined an initiative they had named the Equity Alliance, a coalition designed to tackle systemic discrimination across industries. The initiative aimed to implement training programs, audit corporate policies, and provide resources to uplift marginalized voices. "It's ambitious," Jasmine said, leaning back in her chair. The man nodded. "It is, but if we want lasting change, we have to be bold." Jasmine closed the folder and met his gaze. "I'll do it," she said firmly, "but only if we're fully committed. This can't be a token effort. If I put my name behind this, it has to be real, measurable, impactful, and transformative." The room erupted in nods and murmurs of agreement. Jasmine felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in a long time: excitement. A sense that this was the next step she had been searching for. A movement takes shape. In the months that followed, Jasmine threw herself into the work of building the Equity Alliance. It was a monumental undertaking, but she thrived under the pressure. She surrounded herself with a team of experts, civil rights attorneys, corporate consultants dedicated to ethical reform, and grassroots advocates with firsthand experience in workplace discrimination. The coalition focused on industries where inequity was most deeply entrenched: hospitality, finance, and retail. They conducted audits, uncovered biases in hiring practices, and collaborated with leadership teams to rewrite policies from the ground up. Jasmine became the face of the movement, her story a rallying cry for change. She spoke at conferences, participated in panel discussions, and met with CEOs, some who were ready to take accountability and others who weren't. To those who resisted, she had one unwavering response: "There's no room for half measures." She told a packed audience at a leadership summit, "Change demands discomfort. It requires facing uncomfortable truths and making tough decisions. But the alternative is perpetuating harm, and that's simply not an option." Her words were met with a standing ovation. However, not everyone embraced Jasmine's efforts. Some companies resisted change, unwilling to disrupt their established ways. Others made empty promises, hoping to weather the storm without making any real adjustments. Jasmine faced criticism from critics who labeled her as too radical, too inflexible. Late one night, after a long and exhausting day filled with meetings and calls, Jasmine sat alone in her office, gazing at the city lights outside her window. She was drained, the weight of the work pressing heavily on her. Her phone buzzed with a message from Claire, the young journalist who had helped expose the Skyline scandal. "Don't let them wear you down," the text read. "What you're doing matters. People are watching, and they're learning from you." Jasmine smiled faintly. The message was a reminder of why she had embarked on this journey: to create a world where people like Claire, and like herself, didn't have to fight so hard just to be seen and heard. Months later, Jasmine stood at the grand opening of the Equity Alliance's first physical headquarters, a sleek building in the heart of the city. The space had been designed to foster collaboration and innovation, with open workspaces, conference rooms, and a resource center for marginalized employees seeking support. As she cut the ribbon, surrounded by her team and supporters, Jasmine felt a surge of pride. This wasn't just a building. It was a symbol of what could be achieved when people came together to demand better. That evening, Jasmine returned to her townhouse, the glow of the day still warming her heart. She stepped out onto her balcony with a glass of wine, gazing out at the city. Her phone buzzed with messages, congratulatory notes, updates from her team, invitations to upcoming events. She set it aside, choosing instead to savor the moment. Her thoughts drifted to her mother, whose lessons had shaped her resilience. Jasmine could almost hear her voice. "Never let them define who you are. Define yourself." As the stars began to dot the night sky, Jasmine allowed herself a rare moment of peace. She knew the fight for equity was far from over, but she also knew she had built something enduring, something that would continue to grow and thrive long after she was gone. Years later, the Equity Alliance had become a global force, with chapters in cities around the world. Jasmine's name had become synonymous with resilience, justice, and change. At a gala celebrating the Alliance's 10th anniversary, Jasmine stood before an audience of thousands. Her speech was simple but powerful. "This movement isn't about me," she said. "It's about all of us. about choosing to stand up when it's easier to stay silent, about choosing courage over complacency. We've made progress, but the work isn't done. And it never will be. Not until every person in every corner of the world is treated with dignity and respect. The crowd erupted into applause, but Jasmine remained thoughtful. The applause wasn't for her. It was for the movement, for the countless voices that had joined hers in demanding change. As she left the stage, she felt a sense of fulfillment she rarely allowed herself to feel. The battle was ongoing, but she had created something that would endure. Jasmine Carter had transformed a moment of injustice into a lifetime of purpose. And as she walked into the next chapter of her life, she knew the horizon was brighter than ever. Jasmine Carter had turned a moment of injustice into a movement for change, proving that resilience and courage can dismantle even the deepest-rooted prejudices. Her story is a powerful reminder that standing up for what's right can inspire change far beyond our imagination. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Join us for more stories that uncover truths, celebrate triumphs, and spark conversations that matter. Your support helps us keep these stories alive. Thank you for watching.